Build Your Business listeners. This is Matt Reynolds, your host for the podcast, and you are listening to what we are calling the legacy episodes. And really, these are the pre-episodes that really led to this podcast, the Build Your Business podcast. This is really my life's work and my brother's life's work in building your business. And so they were originally published in the Barbell Logic podcast as part of the Principles or Coaching Success series, but really touch on similar topics to the Build Your Business podcast: how to improve your productivity, how to set and accomplish your goals, deprioritize urgent tasks, to focus on what is most important to you, and most importantly, to become a better person and leader and business owner overall. I'm proud to bring you these podcasts. Again, many years of life's work, several years of podcasts, and several decades of business ownership. Hope you enjoy them and learn from them. You're listening to Barbell Logic, brought to you by Barbell Logic Online Coaching, where each week we take a systematic walk through strength training and the refining power of voluntary hardship. Welcome to the Barbell Logic podcast. This is the productivity series, and I'm here with my brother, Chris Reynolds. You guys have listened to him before. Welcome to the show.
Hello.
So we've got this great productivity series. I'm really excited about it. You and I, we're probably on, 2/3 of these, half of these productivity episodes we've done in the past. Things like Pomodoros and working efficiently and being able to sort of lock it down and focus. And we talk about early to bed, early to rise. And so all those things that you and I really were never taught by our parents. Interestingly enough, and I'm sure we'll get into this some, our parents modeled efficiency pretty well.
Yeah, I'd say so.
They were both pretty efficient at thinking about what they were working on. Dad certainly wasn't the most efficient at things like working on cars, which he always did. I'm sure we'll get to that here in a second. But one thing we haven't talked about, I don't think ever on the podcast, is the value of time. And this is certainly a lesson that while I think our parents modeled this okay for us, they certainly never taught it to us. And I don't know if they ever thought about it.
Probably not. I mean, I think for the most part, I actually think it's a rare thing to find people that do think about this. And when you think about it, it's one of those things where it's so pivotal, but you have to stop and think about it. In your life, you've got always the possibility that you could make more money, but you have zero possibility that you can make more time.
That's right.
It is the most finite resource that we have.
And therefore, I would argue, the most valuable resource that we have.
By far, without question. You take a guy like Warren Buffett, and if you went to him today and you asked him, would you like to trade places and give all your money away to somebody who has to be, 95 or however old he is now? It's like getting old.
Get another 50 years.
Or, you could be young and live for another 50 years. He'd take it in a heartbeat.
Sure.
The time is more valuable. And so I think it's one of those things where when we look at how we spend our time, we want to make sure that we understand what the money value of our time is so that we can make good choices and trade-offs whenever we're, trying to make decisions.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So I think people know this about me. This is probably the thing that colors my daily schedule more than anything else. I am constantly thinking about efficiency and the value of my time. And I've done that for a long time. A lot of this has to do with how much is your time worth? Like literally, how much money is your time worth?
Right. Yep.
If you are an unskilled worker and you are making $15 an hour at a job, and that's the best you can make, your time's basically worth $15 an hour. That's basically what it's worth.
Yep.
But if you are a professional worker and you're making $100 an hour or $200 an hour or more, then your time, the actual monetary value of your time is significantly higher. And I think sometimes that sort of rubs people wrong a little bit. Like, well, you could start to say, well, my time is more valuable than my 16-year-old daughter's time. And it is. Now, I'm not talking about the fact that, time is still the most valuable thing to her. It is the most valuable thing to all. But where I first learned this concept was actually in the E-Myth Revisited. And I've talked about this book lots of times. It's kind of interesting. I have to remember, I still get asked a lot about books that people should read when they're starting businesses. And that is a book I tell everybody that asks. I'm like, you should read that book when you're starting a business. Our business has grown so far beyond that at this point that it doesn't impact our business that much, but it certainly did in the early years. And it did at Strong Gym too, is when you start, Everybody that starts a business that is an entrepreneur is the owner of the business, is the manager of the business, and is the technician in the business. You're doing everything, right?
Yep.
So you own the gym, you manage the gym, and you're the coach in the gym, and you're the custodian, and you are the front desk employee. You're all of it. And then you get to a point where you're like, well, so this is what I realized at Strong. Back in those days, I was charging about $50 an hour for coaching. Certainly isn't great, but that's certainly worth more money than it is to clean the gym, than custodial services in the gym. Think about the early 2000s, 2008, somewhere there. The value to clean the gym, I could have hired a college kid or a high school kid or a homeless guy off the street to clean the gym for $8 an hour, and I was making $50 an hour coaching. I'm actually losing $42 an hour if I'm cleaning the gym.
Yep.
So it's not about me being too good to clean the gym. It's that I could hire somebody else to clean the gym, and in that same hour that it would take me to clean the gym, or the same 2 hours it would take me to clean the gym, I could do 2 hours of coaching and I could have a net positive return on investment of $42. That's the first time that ever got presented to me. And I was like, oh, this is starting to make sense now.
Right. There are simpler and more complex ways to think about this. It's not just as cut and dry as how much do you make an hour?
Sure.
There's how much do you make in a marginal hour? Meaning, if you're only capable of making money when you're on the clock for your employer, then yeah, it's true. Your marginal time, the time where you're not working, quote unquote, may not be worth that much. But in today's world, most of the time you could do what you are a professional at after hours.
Right. Anytime.
If you wanted to, right? So it's theoretically possible that you could. And so in doing that, you can sort of set, how much money you could actually make during those hours. There's another part of this too, which is a question of how much more productive can you be in your regular work time if you're not doing other things in your marginal time?
That's right.
And so this sort of hits to two different types of people. They're the type of people who want to work, 8 hours a day, they clock in, they clock out, they're done.
Yep.
Right. For those people, they need to think a lot more about what things should I be doing with my marginal time? That's important. For people who are maybe a little bit more on the spectrum of being work obsessed, those people need to think about what happens when you are working all the time and you get your weekend. Your weekend is finally here for you to rest a little bit and finally let your brain just sit and hang out with your family, hang out with your kids, take your spouse on a date. But instead, you have to mow the lawn, you have to repair the dishwasher, you have to do all these other things. And you get done with your weekend, you're more tired coming out than you were going in. That's another problem.
That's right.
Right. So there are two different pieces of this that you have to think about, and it's worth thinking about which side of that you're on.
Yep. Can you think about the first time that you first kind of thought about this issue, or when did this first kind of hit you? Do you remember?
Yeah, I think it was related to the business as well. I mean, I think I've been living in a universe where the amount of work that is always available to me at a very high hourly rate is so long,
Infinite.
that I think I could work for the rest of my life right now.
Basically infinite.
Yeah, just keep cranking at a very high hourly multiple. And so that makes it really easy for me to make choices about things like, it was the simple stuff like mowing the lawn, cleaning the house. Those are really early moves for us. Jenny and I made the decision really early on that the only place that we ever argued in our early marriage was around the house cleaning, because she has a requirement that the house be incredibly, incredibly clean. And I can go about 2 or 3 days longer than she can.
Right.
When that, it has reached a level that I won't be able to handle. And so it always made better sense for us to get somebody in, eliminate that problem. And the cost to have that done is usually pretty low by comparison to what, the cost of your time is. So that was pretty early. I think we had just started the business. It was, within the first year or two of working on the business. And I think I maybe still mowed the lawn. And then I had people start doing the lawn service probably within a matter of months of that, because I was like, wait a minute. That was really where the weekend became a big deal for me. I was like, if I don't recuperate somewhat over the weekend, because I'm working anyway on the weekend. I'll wake up in the morning, brew coffee, and I'll break out my laptop and work, right?
Yep.
But I want to know that after breakfast, I could go on a hike with my wife, like,
Yep.
but you can't do that if you have this, 2 or 3 hour lawn mowing job sitting ahead of you that you're just dreading to do. And so getting rid of that was another huge deal as well. And this is the earliest memory that I have of thinking about that problem. Like, wait a minute, if I could bill $200 an hour to sit on this laptop, then in 15 minutes, I can pay to have somebody mow my lawn.
That's right. Right.
Okay, well, I don't really ever need to mow my lawn for the rest of my life.
Unless you love it, right?
Unless you love it. If you love it, it's great.
And there are parts of this. So I think I first thought about it when I watched Dad try to do car repairs.
Yeah.
Again, our parents were very efficient at just life in general, work, house cleaning. Mom, I've always joked, our mom is extremely fast, like grocery shopper. So much so that she's basically running down the aisles and holding her arm out and just knocking shit into the cart. And sometimes she'd buy the wrong thing, right? Like she'd buy whatever, the wrong flavor of something because she just was going so fast. So they obviously thought about that efficiency of time. But our parents' generation, painting with a broad brush here, obviously, was one that they always want to do the handyman work, the fix-it work,
Yeah.
And when Dad did stuff around the house, which I think he enjoyed some, and when he worked on the car, which I think he did not enjoy at all, he was so slow and inefficient. And we'd have to, and you'd be 12 years old or 14 years old. And he'd be like, want to sit out here and hand me wrenches? I'm like, oof, not really. And so then when I got a car and Mom and Dad were like, listen, you got to, the kind of normal wear and tear, oil changes and brake shoes and things like that. I'd look at something like a brake pad. Well, I can learn how to replace the brake pads on my car. And maybe for some people, they want to learn how to do it. It's a skill they want to learn. For me, I would go, I don't know, new brake pads on the cars of $120, $150. And a professional can replace that in like a half an hour. For me, it would have taken like 4 hours to replace. And so you start to look at it and go like, man, even when I was like 18 years old, I started to go like, I don't think it's worth it to me. And it was up in the air at the time. Now it's not up in the air at all. Now, like clearly it's not worth it to me to do any work on my car at all. And even stuff, again, there are things that I think people want to do. Like we've got the cabin down at, in the rural, up on the river. I love to do manual labor down there.
Yeah.
Like it takes me it's a refresher for me when all you do is sit at a desk all day and look at a computer and the whole business is online and it's not like this tangible thing you can feel. There's something that's actually very pleasing about going down to our rural cabin and working on the land and building the workshop table. And, we basically built that whole cabin. We bought a shell and then we did all the infill on it. And so that's been actually really fun. And so, somebody might look at that and be like, why are you doing that? Because your time is more valuable than that. Except I actually really like that.
I mean, I remember doing that with the house we bought. We bought and remodeled a 1911 bungalow as our very first house.
Yeah.
And for me, the drive was a little different. I mean, I'm a hacker through and through. I like to understand how everything works.
Yeah.
I want to be able to take things apart and put them back together. And I'm uncomfortable in a situation where I don't know how everything works. So when we had that house, there were all sorts of things that I did that the joy in it for me was in learning how it worked. So I would replace plumbing and I would do all sorts of things. I did stuff like with hot water heaters and I did stuff with electricity that I probably should not have been doing. All of this stuff largely because I wanted to understand how it worked. And until I did, I wouldn't be satisfied. But once I did understand how it worked and once I knew that I could do it, even though I knew it was less efficient than someone who, did it every day of their life, a plumber or electrician, whatever, it was still, that part was enjoyable. But the second I knew how to do it, and the second I knew I could do it with a lot of hours, it was no longer fun.
Yeah, it's time to hire it out.
After that, time to hire it out.
Yeah.
And I've hired every ounce of house stuff like that, repair work, anything since then. If I understood generally how the machine worked, and I knew that I could do it with a long enough period of time and with enough cuts on my hands, then I'm done.
That's right.
At that point, it's time for me to hire it out to somebody else. And that's just my personality. Not all personalities that way. I like knowing how washers and dryers and dishwashers and cars and all those things work. So I actually did quite a bit of work on my car early on. And Jenny's dad was a big car guy, so he'd help me with it. I wasn't doing it for the money reason.
Right.
I wasn't trying to save dollars.
You're doing it for the education.
I wanted to understand how the car worked inside and out. And once I did, then I was like, okay, at this point, it's time to turn it over to a mechanic.
Yeah, that's a great point. There are places where, again, if you love the process or you love the learning piece of this, then I would never argue that you shouldn't do it. You should do it, right? But there are other places. I flew home yesterday from DC. We had a great Barbell Logic camp in DC this past weekend. By the way, DC, bro, more closed, more scared and more closed than Boston is. It's bizarre.
Boston's way open at this point. Like,
well, I mean, DC is mostly open except for none of the federal stuff is, like the Smithsonian's still closed and all the monuments and stuff are closed. When we went to the Lincoln Monument, it's outdoors, but I saw more people outdoors double masked in DC than I have seen over the entire pandemic. By the way,
wild.
Not making a judgment call about this. Please don't email me. I'm just saying this is what I saw, right? It was interesting, the number of double, and at night it was 94 degrees outside.
Yeah, so hard to breathe.
I've always considered, you probably don't now that you live in Boston, actually, it's interesting. So back when you lived in the Midwest, I don't know if you were like this, to Midwesterners, we think of Washington, D.C. as being one of the big cities in the Northeast.
Right.
It's in Virginia. It's hot as balls there.
Yeah.
It is actually a city, but it's like the furthest south city.
We consider that mid-Atlantic.
Mid-Atlantic, right.
Out here, you know, the Northeast does not really begin. And most people would even say that New York is not quite in the Northeast. Like we would say Northeast is New England.
Right. That's right. When you go to Boston, New York is a long way south of Boston.
Yeah, it's a 3-hour drive.
You're like, New York is hot and Boston is not. It's an hour drive from Boston and you're in Maine.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we can get in Maine in an hour easy.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Yeah. So we were there. It was hot. Sun was out and lots of people double masked, which I got to assume most of the people that are outside double masked are vaccinated. So I was like, whew,
it's wild.
Pretty hot, guys. But, you know, ain't judging, just observing. So yesterday, I flew home. It's a conversation I've had with my staff. And it's not a sore spot. It's just one where I'm trying to understand the views of people that don't think the way I do. And by the way, I'm not trying to get everybody to think the way I do. When people don't think the way I do, I genuinely want to learn why they think that way. One of the things that's been really interesting for me about like politics or religion, which we won't dive into either one of those on this show, but on a personal level, if someone disagrees with my viewpoint, I think it is common right now in the polarization of our society to almost view someone who doesn't think the way we do as evil. Well, they're bad. You know, they're immoral, they're evil. And the reality is that every single person on earth that has actually considered and actually spent any amount of time thinking about politics or religion or things like that, they believe what they believe is right, is morally right. They're like, I believe this is correct. And so if you come from that perspective, where you're like, listen, this person disagrees with me pretty significantly about some of these big picture topics, they don't think that way because they're evil in general. I think there are probably some people out there that are uber greedy or self-centered or egotistical, and they probably are a little bit evil. But in general, I think humanity is trying to go like, man, I believe people that are on the right believe that being on the right is best. And people that are on the left believe that being on the left is best. And people that are deeply religious think that that is best for humanity, obviously. And people who are agnostic or atheists think the same. And so we can do that. We can actually still see people as humans and, you know, have an intrinsic value in their humanity. And so I don't need everybody to think like me, but when I travel, I still enjoy traveling, and I enjoyed it a little more lately because I didn't get to do it as much over COVID. And so, you know, we love to travel. For me, and I know it is for you too, flying on an airplane, I love flying on an airplane. I get more great work done on an airplane. Great work. I mean, it is Cal Newport, deep work level stuff on an airplane, right?
Yep.
However, I have got to be intentional about that flight, about where I sit. I generally do not want to sit in a coach seat. You know, it's a comfort plus type seat, premium, or it's first class. And let me just say, like, we get lots of points. The vast majority of the time I'm able to buy first class seats with my points on the card. So it doesn't cost me anything other than points. The quality of work I get done on an airplane in a good, comfortable seat with my earbuds in so people won't talk to me. The first class seats out of Springfield a lot of times are the one seat on the left and the two seats on the right. So I get the one seat on the left, so there's nobody beside me. I can just crush work. Now, flying an airplane, even in coach, that's expensive. It's expensive to fly. It's more expensive to fly, you know, premium economy, and it's real expensive to fly first class. But for me, if I were going to drive to Washington, D.C., that's 18 hours.
Mm-hmm.
It's a nearly 40-hour round trip drive. Or I can fly there in 3. When I'm driving to Washington, D.C., I can do no other work other than drive. Like maybe I listen to a podcast or an audiobook, which is certainly what I would do if I were on a road trip, so that I get some value out of it beyond just the driving. But when I'm flying on an airplane, you're traveling passively. If you're intentional about it, you can get a ton of really good work done on that airplane. You can get high value work done. If you are somebody whose time is worth a lot of value, right? So there are two reasons that you wouldn't do this. One is, and I think this is the case with a lot of people, you literally just don't have the money in your bank account to buy the nicer ticket or buy the ticket at all. And if that's the case, that's the case. There's nothing you can do, right? Like probably would steer you towards the direction of a little more financial, working on your financial life, because as you started to talk about, as you hired somebody to mow your lawn or somebody to clean your house, even young, the ability to not be in financial ruin is really about freedom. Money brings you freedom if you do it right. You can be a slave to it as well.
Yeah, there's no question. I've learned over time, we grew up in a world where there was morality being taught around the idea on the expense side.
Yes.
And never on the revenue side, never on the income side.
Right.
Always on the expense side.
That's right.
Oh, you're spending too much money. You should feel bad,
Right.
And the longer that I'm in this world and the more people that I've met, it is a running joke amongst people who are financial advisors, et cetera, that people can underspend their way completely out of a financially ruinous situation.
Yeah, that's a great point. How do they get out of it?
It just doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen.
You want to get out of financial ruin? You make more money.
You got to earn your way out.
Yeah.
I realize that probably sounds depressing to some people. And there are people probably right now listening to this with a red face, so mad, like Dave Ramsey said, blah, blah, blah. I don't care what Dave Ramsey said. Dave Ramsey's not wrong in some of the things that he says.
Right. Yeah, we like Dave Ramsey.
Yeah, I like Dave Ramsey just fine. You've got to be responsible with the resources you have. And that's the balance right here, right?
That's right.
You're not going out and spending money on, super luxurious things that you don't need. But at the same time,
or that you can't afford.
Yeah. But at the same time, if you want to get into a position in life where you have a lot more freedom, it's about the income side. It just is.
That's right.
And once the income side gets right, and some people listening to this podcast right now already are there on the income side, but haven't yet made the transition mentally to making the choices that they wouldn't have made under lower income.
That's right.
Because, they have this morality idea around the expense side. Well, I'll never ever buy, a first class ticket or a flight that has extra leg room so that I can set my laptop on my lap, because I can't do that in these super tight spaces.
Yep.
The same was true for me when I had to do trips in and out of New York from Boston. For a while there, it was once a week. And that's about a 3-hour train ride to a 3-hour train ride back. The first class cart cost an additional $100 for the round trip. So $50 per side, right?
Yep.
And I've got all the room I need by myself.
Yep. Nice table.
Great table. Set my laptop up.
Yeah, we rode that train.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's great.
I worked the entire time and generated far more in income than I lost in the ticket. But not everybody's that way. And I think this is an important piece to think about where, as you're thinking about your own productivity, as you're thinking your own financial situation, it is important that you recognize there's a transition point in there. And that transition point is largely around income.
Yeah, that's really good. So it is good to think about expenses. We don't want to spend money frivolously. And you and I have never really been like, we don't, we're not buying $150,000 RVs and boats and Sea-Doos and whatever,
Nope.
Houses that we can't afford and things like that. So if you're somebody that doesn't have a problem there, you certainly want to make sure that you control your expenses. And I love the YNAB way to do that, which is that you give your dollars a job rather than a very tight budget where you almost feel constrained by the budget. Like it's telling you what you have to do with your money rather than you telling your money how you want it to work for you. It's similar, but it's a paradigm shift between kind of the traditional Dave Ramsey, Larry Burkett sort of style of saving and expenses versus the YNAB version. That's why we're such fans of YNAB. But for those people, for my staff makes $100 an hour plus at online coaching. But their argument often is, and they're not wrong, like, yeah, but I only work 1 hour a day. Awesome. What could you do if you chose to work 3 hours a day?
Right.
And so just like you said, it's a paradigm shift in, well, if I make $100 an hour and I only work an hour a day, so I only make $100 a day, therefore I can't afford the first class ticket or the whatever. You go like, yeah, but if your value is $100 an hour plus, and you choose to no longer work an hour a day, but you choose to lay out the schedule of your day so that you have more time to actually do that high value work. Now you work 3 hours a day. Now you make $300 a day. And now you can actually afford. So you start to go, well, I don't just have to control the expenses. I actually can take some control of the income, of the revenue.
That's right.
And it is a big paradigm shift for sure. Same kind of thing happened with me as business has grown. Certainly, haven't been able to afford all the things that we can afford now. It's obviously kind of a long road, but we're in the same boat, like mowing the lawn. And, it's kind of interesting. I like working in my yard. And I like mowing my lawn in like early May.
Yeah. 70-degree temperatures or 60.
Yeah. But then eventually it's July and you're like, what are we doing? And then you can't hire anybody to mow your lawn in July because all the good people that mow lawns, they're booked on lawn mowing. Plus like the yard I have right now, a pretty good sized yard, it would take me at least a couple hours to mow my lawn. It takes professionals about 13 minutes to mow my lawn. They show up with a team of 3, they mow, and in 13 minutes it's done being mowed and the thing looks great and it's all professional. And then I can go out because I like working in the yard and I can go out in the mornings. A lot of times I get up early and I go out and I'll trim my garden up a little bit, or I'll trim the bushes, or I'll do these little things that are like, don't have to be done. Like when your lawn needs to be mowed, that's an urgent thing that needs to be done.
Yeah.
Especially if you live in a neighborhood that's got an HOA and you're going to start hearing about it. Well, I don't ever have to worry about that now because the professionals come and do it. Nobody's going to send me a letter because the bushes need to be trimmed up just a little bit.
Right.
And I can go out there and trim the bushes and I can still be, I enjoy this thing. And it is the same thing with flying. So the one thing about flying that I wanted to get to, we've kind of already mentioned this, is and this is just obviously one example of hundreds, if you really enjoy driving, like you really hate flying or you're scared of flying, I'm not going to judge. Lots of people are scared of flying. Lots of people are uncomfortable with flying. A lot of people can't stand flying. They hate it. And they really enjoy a road trip, the drive. Do the road trip. So what that comes back to is I am constantly thinking every single day about my efficiency of work, about how efficient I am at working. And yet people might look at me and go, but you go hang out at the pool with your wife every day in the afternoon for an hour and a half. That's not very efficient. Absolutely. I love it.
Yep.
That's the important stuff. I work hard and efficient so that I have more time to do the important stuff, which I do not weigh on efficiency, right? So I enjoy training, but I even train efficiently. I trained yesterday at a Lifetime Fitness, one of those big Taj Mahal Lifetime Fitnesses right next to Dulles with Nikki and Andrew. My whole workout was 35 minutes long. I did 6 exercises in 35 minutes. Like, that's it. Right. And I enjoy it. And then I got to go down and I sat in the sauna for like 10 minutes and I went cold shower. And the whole process from the time I walked into Lifetime to the time I was 100% done and had that awesome banana peanut butter protein shake in the protein bar at Lifetime, the whole process was 1 hour. And then guess what I did? I sat down and got good CEO work on the business work done. Instead of lollygagging around and making my workouts take 2.5 hours, it doesn't need to. And so now there are times on a Saturday morning, I want to have a 2-hour workout. I want to have some people over to train with. I want to talk to them. I want to, take my time. And then it's about the enjoyment factor of it all. And so there are reasons that this thing doesn't always work. But for those of you that are thinking about, man, if you look at your daily schedule and you've got urgent things and important things and things you don't want to do and things you do want to do, you take those urgent things, important things, things you don't want to do, and you figure out how to do those in the most efficient way possible, which for some of those things we've talked about in the urgent, important episode that's here in this series, it's often completely getting rid of the non-urgent, non-important things. It's delegating out a lot of urgent, non-important things. It's you tackling, for me, it's me tackling the urgent and important things first in an efficient manner as possible so that I have the most amount of time to spend on the non-urgent, most important things. Time with my wife, time with my kids, being out in the pool, hanging out in the hot tub, going out to dinner with my family. I don't want to rush that. I'm not working those on efficiency.
The reality is the only thing that makes life as an entrepreneur, at least, stable is being able to spend the time on those things.
That's right.
I don't know how many listeners know entrepreneurs, but the more of them that you know, the more you know that a lot of them are pretty frazzled, running around at, working 20 hours a day and crazy stuff. And those entrepreneurs ultimately will rarely succeed because they'll burn out. They're just headed towards a burnout.
That's right.
You have to do this in a sustainable way. And the way you do that is you're actually you create work time that is incredibly efficient so that you have rest time, which is incredibly efficient.
That's right.
Your rest time is efficient in the sense that it's not rest time with a little bit of work in the back of your head. It's rest time fully devoted
100%
to rest and relaxation, hanging out with your family, concentrating on your spouse, kids. And that is what allows them to give you the room as an entrepreneur to take an emergency phone call when it comes in. But if that's happening every day in every, session of hanging out with them, then it's not cool and it doesn't fly. That's the reason why we make sure that our work time is efficient and that we're trading off time that we don't value very highly for anybody who doesn't like mowing the lawn, doesn't enjoy mowing the lawn. If it's possible for you to pay to have somebody else mow the lawn, but what you do like, if you're mowing the lawn under circumstances you like, it's 60 degrees and gorgeous outside or something, remember, you can always pay somebody to mow the lawn and you can go on a hike.
That's right.
You can still get the thing that you want, but you have to figure out what that thing is and make sure that you're trading off and actually using your time in the most valuable way. Because remember, the beginning of this podcast, what we said was, you have a finite amount of time.
Yep.
And you can do nothing to grow that bit of the pie. So it is the most important resource in your entire life for you to figure out how you want to spend it. Because once you spend it, it is gone.
Yeah, I love it. Nikki is going to talk about at the block party, happiness through structure, boundaries, and saying no.
Yep.
So much of it comes back to that, right? So when I really first very intentionally implemented this in my life, it was early on in the online coaching business. And I started, and I've told this story before, I was actually listening to a podcast, a Tim Ferriss podcast, where he had Mr. Money Mustache on. And he was talking about, and Mr. Money Mustache is, this guy who was basically a computer engineer, he and his wife, and they were making $150,000 a year. They figured out how to live on like $20,000 a year, and they worked for like 10 years, and then they were able to retire by the time they were 30 or something. That's where he started to talk about the things, voluntary hardship and the idea of only doing the things, like figuring out how to delegate out the things or cut out the things in your life that you really hate. And not everybody has the freedom to completely do that. But I would argue that most people, everybody actually has the freedom to do some of that.
Yeah.
And so for me, I started to remember sitting out, I was in Florida, I was sitting out on the beach, and I was thinking, what do I really hate to do? And I was like, I hate doing payroll. These are in the early days. I had 35 employees and I was the owner and I was calculating payroll. But I'm also the guy paying out the payroll. And as I was doing it, I would see that number growing at the end of the Excel document, and I would just get like more anxious and more mad and more anxious and more mad. And I started thinking, why am I doing payroll? And I hired out payroll. At the time, payroll cost me like $300 a month to hire it out, and then it didn't rob me of value. It would take me 5 to 8 hours to do payroll. Payroll wasn't an hour-long job. It was a lot of time that robbed me of joy. Twice a month, I had to sit down and knock the thing out, and it was super frustrating. And so, yeah, that was one of the first things I did. And I just started to identify all those other things that I don't enjoy doing. You talk about cleaning your house. We hire somebody to clean our house, but here's another thing that's a big piece of this. Our house is clean all the time, as is yours. We take that, even having a nice house, I know your wife has got to be like a Marie Kondo fan because we Marie Kondo the shit out of our house. The idea is like, you don't have stuff in your house that doesn't bring you joy.
Yeah, that's right.
And if I look around the house is cluttered, it doesn't bring me joy. So one of the things that we can do is just purge our house of the clutter and the things that don't bring us joy. And then you're like, I don't need to have all that stuff. I need to just have the stuff that brings me joy. And for some people, that's going to literally be like 6 or 7 things.
Right.
And for some people, that may be 60 or 70 things. But the reality is like the only stuff you surround yourself with is stuff that brings you joy. Well, now the house isn't cluttered, so it's tougher to get messy in the first place. We keep the kitchen picked up. There's not dirty dishes in the sink, like that kind of stuff. If I walk through the sink and there's dirty dishes, robs me of joy. If I walk through the living room and the windows aren't open, the natural light's not coming in, robs me of joy. So we do those little things. We set up our whole day to try to go, I'm going to choose the things that bring me joy, and I'm going to either purge or I'm going to do so efficiently the things that I do not enjoy. And everybody's got to do things they don't enjoy. If you can't figure out how to purge it or delegate it, you figure out how to do it, but you do it as quickly and efficiently as possible so that I can open up the window to have as much time as possible doing things I do love and that do bring me joy.
Yeah. And those are actually just 2 really deep core principles in general for life. One of them is simplicity, which you just mentioned is sort of the Marie Kondo way of thinking about a house and stuff.
Yep.
It's the same way that great writers write.
Yep.
Get rid of the words, less words, say it in the most efficient way possible. It's the way that great coders code.
Yep.
There's greatness in that principle, right? And the other piece of that is you have to at some point recognize that you don't have the ability to be the world's professional at everything.
Yep.
People are far more efficient than you are at a whole bunch of different things. Entrepreneurs have a tendency to get this pretty early because every person who ever starts a startup knows that they're going to try to do everything, as Matt said earlier, but they can't.
Yep.
And not only that, you eventually find that there are a lot of people in the world that are literally significantly better than you are at a whole swath of things.
Yep.
This is true in your personal life too. You're not the best lawnmower in the world.
Right.
Even if you take great pride in being a great lawnmower, there are better people at lawn mowing. Certainly better people at being a car mechanic, unless you are a car mechanic.
Right.
You ever watch somebody who fixes a particular type of washing machine come in and fix a washing machine? Take them 3 minutes.
How fast they are?
3 minutes.
Right.
And you'll come out with bleeding hands because your hands will be all cut up from trying to take different things apart. And it'll take you, 6 hours to get it done because you'll do 5 things wrong and you won't have the right tools and all that kind of stuff. So these are the areas I think where you can really concentrate. And there are 2 core principles that apply all over life and in all different domains.
Yeah, it's really good. So there you go. So now you have things to think about. How can you value your time? It's easy to value the actual money in the bank account or how much we're getting paid. It's a lot harder to try to place a value there on your time. And of course, so much of that has to do with what you love and what brings you joy and what doesn't. Do the things that bring you joy and be as efficient as you can on the stuff that doesn't. And you can start to think about those things. So I literally, and I do this still about once or twice a year, I actually sit down and write out all of the things that I'm currently doing in my life that I don't really like, that I don't enjoy. And I sort of try to visit those and say, okay, is it possible for me to purge some of this stuff? Is it possible for me to delegate some of this stuff, to discard some of this stuff? And I think that's a good technique, good exercise for everyone to do. And then recognize that, yes, we definitely want to control expenses, but when you start to think this direction, it requires a paradigm shift to instead think about, how can I create more income? Not just how can I control expenses, but how can I create more income? And often there are times like where you want to pay for the upgrade on the plane ticket so that you can do more good work, so that you can make more income, so that it helps give you the life and the freedom that you want. And so that is all part of understanding the monetary value of time.
Absolutely.
There you go. There is another Barbell Logic podcast. Hope you enjoy the productivity series. Again, so many of these things are really things that Chris and I have thought about and talked about even off the air for many years, things like Pomodoros and how to work really efficiently. So we actually will give you, this was more of a philosophical discussion about understanding why the monetary value of your time matters. But in some of these other episodes in the productivity series, we actually give you very specific practical takeaways on how to actually work efficiently, on how to set up your daily schedule to be as efficient as possible, on how to focus and get shit done. Like those things really matter. And that being able to get into deep work, as Cal Newport from his book talks about, being able to get into it quickly and stay in it for an extended period of time is a learned skill. Almost nobody is born with the ability to do that, and to be intentional, to be able to learn how to do that and to work without distraction will open up so much more time to do the things that you really enjoy. Even if those things, some people would look at, even if those things are, if you really enjoy playing video games or you really enjoy looking at social media, I don't know why you would enjoy either one of those, but maybe it's just you enjoy binging Netflix. Again, 3 things I could probably argue are not super healthy for anybody, but to be able to work efficiently, to be able to open up your life, to be able to do the things you love, even if other people might look at that and say, that's stupid that you would love that stuff. Hey, that's your call. It's your life, your schedule. Take control of that and really start to be intentional about the value of your time. And so hope you enjoy this productivity series, this episode, as well as the others in the series. If you like or receive value from this podcast, we would love a 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcast. Way over 1,000 reviews at this point. So we're definitely one of the top reviewed fitness podcasts on the planet. And tell a friend, share it with a friend or family member. This productivity series is a great place to start for people who maybe aren't barbell training, but want to start to see that the thought process, it's so much of this is actually connected. Our ideas of minimum effective dose programming and training absolutely fall in line with the same philosophy of life efficiency and the value of time. And so it's a good place to start and share this podcast with somebody, one of the non-lifter friends in your life or family members. And maybe over time, we'll convert them over to the barbells as well. So thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next week.